This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to this week's edition of Talk Business and Politics. We appreciate you being here. This week, Senator Tom Cotton released an open letter to the leaders of Iran, a letter signed by 46 of his Republican colleagues. The letter warned Iranian leaders that the president's negotiations needed congressional approval and could be undone once Obama leaves office. The reaction from the administration and Democrats was, shall we say, not appreciated. President Obama said that Republicans had a common cause with the hardliners in Iran. Vice President Joe Biden said that it ignored 2 centuries of presidents. Some said that the Republicans had violated the Logan Act. I actually caught up with Senator Cotton on Thursday afternoon via satellite from Washington, D.C. to discuss his motivation, the reactions to the letter, and where this debate may go next. All right, Senator Cotton, you have made some headlines this past week, being kind of the lead author of a letter that has gone out about your concerns over Iran. You've outlined some opposition to the nuclear enrichment program, the fact that there's a 10-year sunset being negotiated with the administration, and the fact that the Senate's not been as included in the process as you wanted it to be. Has anything changed since that letter has come out to alter that trajectory of the conversations of the negotiations with Iran?
No, Roby, I and so many other senators are still gravely concerned about the threat of a nuclear Iran. The letter that I wrote, and I persuaded 46 of my Senate colleagues to join, including every member of our Republican leadership, every Republican on the Armed Services Committee, and all 12 Republican freshmen, states basic facts of American constitutional law to Iran's leaders, that if Congress doesn't approve a deal, Congress will not accept a deal. Not now, not tomorrow, not in the future. And as you said, the proposed terms of this deal that President Obama has already foreshadowed, whatever the final terms may be, make it unacceptable. The idea that the deal would sunset in just 10 years and that Iran would be allowed to have vast uranium enrichment programs, which are a critical precursor to the bomb, make this too dangerous for the U.S. For the world to accept, in my opinion.
But has anything changed since you've written this letter? I mean, has the administration reached out to you? Have you seen a change in the tone of the negotiations? I mean, I would suggest that things are still the same as they were before this letter came out.
Well, Secretary Kerry in the Senate earlier this week conceded exactly our point. That is, the deal they are negotiating is legally non-binding if the Congress does not approve it. It's also troubling to note that if it's legally non-binding on the United States, it's not binding on Iran either. So you really have to ask, why is President Obama going down this path of negotiating a bad deal and not submitting it for congressional approval if Iran is not going to be bound by it either? That could make the deal even more dangerous. So that's been a very big development this week.
There are a lot of people who think this was obviously a publicity stunt. I mean, there was probably no consultation with the administration before this letter came out. There's no Democrats that signed onto the letter. I would suggest and be interested in hearing your opinion as to whether or not you reached out to any Democrats in the Senate. Is that a constructive way to approach foreign policy debate, is to throw an open letter out there versus have either public or private conversations, discussions, dialogue to try to advance some real concerns that you've raised?
Roby, we wanted to be crystal clear that Iran's leaders got the message. Many Iran experts will tell you that their leadership does not understand our constitutional system. Also, it's possible that they are not receiving the message in Geneva during the negotiations, or they are not transmitting the message back to Iran's leadership. So it was critical that Iran's leaders get the message that if Congress doesn't approve this deal, Congress will not accept the deal. My office did approach the offices of several Democratic senators who have expressed similar viewpoints. We didn't have any of them sign on. They're still welcome to join us. It's an open letter. Any other Republican or Democrat can join us. But I can tell you that many senators in both parties have grave doubts about the deal the president is negotiating, and they certainly believe that Congress should have a chance to weigh in on any deal.
Well, again, I mean, you suggested that you wanted the Iranian leaders to get this message crystal clear. They seem to dismiss the letter. I mean, if you look at what the foreign minister said, this kind of communication is unprecedented and undiplomatic. He said this was part of a propaganda campaign. I mean, did it really achieve the goal that you wanted it to achieve?
Roby, I'm glad you raised Foreign Minister Javad Zarif's comments, because his response to our letter prove the need for the letter to begin with. He clearly doesn't understand the American Constitution. He's clearly misrepresenting it to the senior leadership in Iran. As far as the response of other leaders, like the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, he is a murderous dictator. He and his ilk have been killing Americans for 35 years. They are the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. I consider it a badge of honor that I and so many other of my Republican senators are being attacked by a murderous dictator like Ayatollah Khamenei.
Let's pull back to the letter here. So what happens if the agreement, the negotiations with Iran fall through? What happens if the Senate doesn't approve this, if Congress doesn't approve this? Where does the next step go from here?
As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said in his speech to the Congress, the alternative to a bad deal is a better deal. 2 years ago in the House of Representatives, I and 400 other congressmen voted to tighten sanctions on Iran, just a few months before President Obama unfortunately loosened sanctions on Iran. But if the president reaches a bad deal that we disapprove or reaches no deal at all, the Congress can move forward quickly with tightened sanctions, and hopefully President Obama will finally begin to confront Iran's drive for regional dominance, where they're already exerting regional dominance in states like Iraq and Syria and Lebanon and Yemen. So the alternative to a bad deal is a better deal, a deal that ensures the complete nuclear disarmament of Iran, not just today and tomorrow, but 10 and 15 years from now.
So do you want the administration to start over from scratch with where they're at now, or do you just want these specific things, the 10-year sunset, the uranium enrichment program, do you want those things taken out?
The administration should go back to their opening positions, which was consistent with United Nations Security Council resolutions. Iran does not have a right to enrich uranium. They don't even have a legitimate need to enrich uranium. Iran has a clear model if it wants to disarm. South Africa and Libya both unconditionally disarm their nuclear programs. As Prime Minister Netanyahu said, if Iran wants to be treated like a normal nation, it needs to act like a normal nation.
What's your next step? So how do you go from here? I mean, are you going to issue another public letter? Are you going to just make the rounds on talk shows like this? Or how are you going to try to constructively advance your concerns with the administration and what's being negotiated beyond what has happened and transpired this week?
Well, I'm going to do everything I can to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. I'm going to do everything I can to ensure that the world, that the United States does not face that kind of existential threat.
But what does that involve, Senator? Yeah.
That includes speaking out, as I and 46 other senators have this week, against the idea that Congress won't have any say in this deal. Pretty soon, March 24th, the new deadline for this round of negotiations, many Democrats in the Senate have said if there is no deal by that point, they would support sanctions legislation, on which I've been working, not just this year, but for the past 2 years. There's also legislation that would require time for Congress to review any deal and potentially have an up or down vote. I'm going to be working on that legislation as well, in addition to speaking out against the threat to the world and to our children of a nuclear Iran.